Collapse of the US dollar, central bank digital currencies, control inside of corporations in America. We are going to tie it all together to give a holistic picture from a biblical perspective with today's guest. I am having Clay Clark on the show. He's a returning guest. You're not going to want to miss this episode, so make sure you stick around until the end. Are you equipped to navigate the cultural chaos of today, the anti-Christian culture in America, and also in our corporations? Well, my guest today is going to help talk all about that. We're going to give you the lowdown, and we're going to talk about how the dollar is collapsing and the CBDC and all the plans they have going on in this direction. Clay Clark, welcome back to Cutting Edge Faith.
Hey, thank you so much for carving out time for me. I really do appreciate you.
It's great to have you on. We had you on recently, and not too long ago, and we had a great conversation, lots of good feedback. And you're busy. You got a lot going on. You're the founder of the Reawaken America Tour. You're running multiple businesses. You got coaching. You got lots of stuff going on. So how do you find time to be engaged with culture, or is that just the core of everything you're doing here?
Well, okay. Long story short, I started my first successful company when I was in high school or in my parents' basement and dorm room, and I think my dorm room in college. And I built that company. This is all pre-Christ, a big company called DJconnection.com. And we were doing about 4,000 weddings or corporate events per year. Now, as you start to move your way up or try to move your way up, you start to recognize that we all have 24 hours in a day. So I just developed a routine where I go to bed at 9 and I wake up at 3. That's just what I do. Always go to bed at 9 and wake up at 3. So that's my normal everyday go to bed at 9, wake up at 3. So, and because I do that and I work 6 days a week, I find, that is how I've written 20 something books, or that's how I've started multiple companies. It's just, I always there's a book Jeff Olson wrote about it back in the day. I believe the author's name was Jeff Olson. I read that over 15 years ago, called Slight Edge. But specifically, I go to bed at 9 and wake up at 3, and that's just what I do. And it's a routine where I'm locked and loaded, regardless of where I am in the world or what's going on. I really try to adhere to that schedule. That's very, very helpful. And then as far as, why I'm doing this push back against the Great Reset is I'm a business person. I enjoy business. I enjoy growing companies, but you can't have a business if you can't have economic freedom. And so therefore, our biggest limiting factor, if I owned a business, you always ask I always ask my clients, what is your biggest limiting factor? I always ask business owners, what is your biggest limiting factor? And the biggest limiting factor facing our nation right now is the collapse of the dollar and the ending of freedom to buy, sell, etc. And so that's how I got involved. That's what drew me into getting involved. And then my clients who listen to my Thrive Time Show podcast, I make sure we put out content each and every day. We had hit number one on iTunes 6 times out of all categories before the Great Reset, where we interviewed Wolfgang Puck and John Maxwell and so many wonderful people that bigger names that people are excited about hearing from. And I would interview them and ask them how to start and grow successful companies. Well, long story short, when the lockdowns happened, my listeners began to ask at scale, what can I do to feed my family if my business is forced to close? And so I quickly researched and learned 5 things very quickly. I learned that the models that said that 2.2 million people would die from COVID, that the very justification for COVID was false, funded by Bill Gates and made by Neil Ferguson, who's always wrong. I learned that the PCR tests could be falsely calibrated to inflate the cases. Those PCR tests were created by Kerry Mullis. He would know. He said those tests could be falsely used to inflate the number of positive cases. 3, I found out that COVID was actually treatable using hydroxychloroquine. How did I know this? It was on the NIH website before the lockdowns. I found out that the system and method for testing for COVID-19, again, the system and method for testing for COVID-19, that's what you look up in Google, system and method for testing for COVID-19 was patented in 2015. And then finally, I found out that there's a thing called the Great Reset, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, that was being pushed by Klaus Schwab, Yuval Noah Harari, and their ilk. And that's what, so I sued the mayor of Tulsa, turned my building into a church, and every Thursday, I hosted these workshops or town hall meetings every single Thursday, pushing back against the lockdowns, and they grew and grew and grew. Eventually, I met General Flynn, and now 24 events later, we're doing a very unprofitable, very unfinancially sustainable, eye-opening, mind-expanding thing called the Reawaken America Tour.
Well, and my wife and I have had the opportunity to visit one of those, and we went down in Miami last year, and
Okay.
that was just absolutely incredible. And what I'm hearing is you came to this from a very practical starting point. It was, what am I going to do with my business? And so from the very beginning, you've got that kind of mindset, that practical mindset. And what's great is you're bringing in sort of the bigger picture with it as well and tying that all together. And now you've got the biblical aspect of it and the spiritual aspect, and we see have a holistic picture for all of this. And so it's
Yeah.
great to see really that brought together. And
Well, you know, the thing is, I am saying this 100% true statement. On this show, but off this show, I like you and I like people like you because at the end of the day, you have a show and you have a microphone. I have a microphone. We have a show. So in order for this broadcast to work, we need to put an XLR cable or whatever cable you have that attaches this cable. It takes the audio down this cord into whatever audio system we have, and then there's practical steps.
mm,
And we live in a culture where a lot of people want to emotionalize it. They want to talk about how do we feel about the
yeah,
XLR cord? How do you feel about the microphone? How do you what impact will it make on the environment if we were to plug the cord in? If we don't plug the cord in, what impact would it make? Does it cause anxiety to not plug the cord in? So we're talking about basic issues like, hey, COVID's treatable with hydroxychloroquine. Hey, we should build a wall like Egypt has. Egypt has a massive wall keeping it out the people from Gaza. There's a massive wall between Egypt and Gaza. Well, why don't we have that kind of wall? Well, if we built the wall, is it safe? Is it fair? Is it ethical? Is it legal? Is it racist? Is it? I mean, we live in a culture, and I just don't do that in my personal life ever, and
yeah,
I don't do it in my business life. So that's why my circle of friends, the people that like me or choose to spend time with me, uh, always refer to me as, this is Captain Practical. So whenever there's a big family weekend and a bunch of families are getting together, people will often call me and go, "Can you organize it?" Because they know I'm going to get it done. But they also know if you want to talk about a deep emotional issue, don't talk to me because I'm going to try to end the conversation as quickly as possible.
right. Well, I think it's interesting. I'm glad you brought up the idea of feelings and all that because I'm seeing now this new. I don't even know if it's a legal standard. I'm starting to research this a little more. Offensiveness actually in corporations being something that as a reason to why you can't talk about religion or can't talk because somebody was offended by it. And so now if you talk about how you're offended by some other radical race ideology that's being pushed by a corporation or an LGBT ideology, instead of them being worried about you're being offended or insulted by that, they say you need to be more inclusive. So it's a little bit of a double standard there. But I'm wondering, as we talk about DEI and corporate America and anti-Christian, all the stuff, ESG, what do you have? What's on your mind when it comes to these sorts of things?
Well, I'm going to explain the mechanics of how it's going to happen, and then maybe we could talk about, my thoughts on it. I have them, but I just want to explain the mechanics of it. Okay, so
Yeah.
right now, everybody should write this down. Maybe you watch this show half speed later, but I'm going to go through it quickly. Okay, so Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These countries have been hoarding the Earth's gold since 1971. What am I saying? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They've been hoarding the Earth's gold, gathering the Earth's gold. But the last 17 years, it's been very documented. But since 1971, many countries have recognized that, wow, America, since 1971, it moved off of the gold standard. So let me try again. 1971, America moves off the gold standard per the recommendation of Henry Kissinger. In 1971, the Klaus Schwab starts the World Economic Forum per the recommendation of Henry Kissinger. And in 1971, many countries started having the thought of like, wow, the US dollar, it's not backed by anything. And it's just based upon a relationship where the US has agreed to protect Saudi Arabia militarily, and Saudi Arabia has agreed to export their oil in exchange for US dollars. And so, as long as Saudi Arabia exports their oil and prices it in US dollars, we're going to protect Saudi Arabia militarily. So, it's not even a gold standard. The dollar is backed by nothing. So many countries blatantly in the past 17 years have been hoarding the Earth's gold. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Now, January 1st this year, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, they've now joined. What am I saying? You have Iran, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Egypt. They've now joined with Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa to create what's called a BRICS bloc. Starting in January, Putin, starting in 2024, Putin in Russia took over as the head of BRICS this year. And Putin has broadcasted and has said that he wants to add an additional 30 countries. So what's happening is we're seeing a shift where more countries will not be using the US dollar than will be using the US dollar. And you say, well, what are they going to be using? They're going to be using a gold-backed programmable central bank digital currency. They had to build a physical bank, and they did it many years ago, called the New Development Bank. It now stands very tall in Shanghai, China, called the New Development Bank. They had to hoard the earth's gold. They did that. They had to work out a payment system that doesn't involve the SWIFT or the US dollar system, and that is called BRICS Pay, and it works. They had to perfect the technology, and it's here. And so they had to put 5G towers up everywhere. You could view those as listening posts. They had to pay a Harvard scientist by the name of Charles Lieber to create RNA modifying nanotechnology that goes under your skin. You could call it surveillance under the skin. So that technology was created. So now inside the COVID shots, there was RNA modifying nanotechnology, which included graphene. Graphene is the basis for quantum computing. Graphene is the basis for quantum computing. The name of the new programmable central bank digital currency system is called Quant.network. That's the website. Quant.network. That's the website. That's the web address. Quant.network. And then you have the quantum dot. MIT created the quantum dot, which has the capacity to store your medical and financial records under your skin using this graphene technology. So all of the technology is in place. All the components are in place. The countries are nearly in place. And what they're going to do is they are going to simply stop using the US dollar for trading, buying and selling. And that's a problem for the US because we import virtually everything except for the US dollar. We export the US dollar for everything that we want. And so we're about ready to find a time where, being a time where our dollar is not worth less, it's worthless. And then they're going to say, who's they? Joe Biden, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, et cetera. They're going to introduce what's called Fed Now. They're going to introduce what's called the central bank digital currency. They're going to introduce that per the executive order of Joe Biden, Executive Order 14067, Executive Order 14067. What? Executive Order 14067. And that is going to introduce non-binary money, money that is programmable so that you and I can simply not buy or sell as we want. So for a good example of that, look at China. So in China right now, a young man or a young woman doesn't think the government is treating them properly. If they say those words out loud, China can hear because they have those 5G towers up, the listening posts, the smart device, the WeChat, and then the young discontent citizen is sent to a re-education camp. And that's what happens in China. And that's how they implement this system.
That's exactly right. And I think there is one camera for every 2 citizens in China already. And so they've got cameras everywhere as well, and they can track everything that people are doing. And they even have internet search history. And I've seen them going after people and prosecuting people for searches they did on the internet 3 years earlier in China. And I've seen actual from global ministries validating that in cases of that. And so this controlled speech, this controlled everything is how, like you said, this is going to be ushered in. And so what is it that you see happening with regard to this, like inside of corporations? I mean, do you
Yeah.
see corporations getting on board with all of this, or what are you
Well,
seeing with that
what
regard?
I try to do on my show, anytime I'm on a show, is I try not to use my opinion because I think we all have opinions, and maybe my opinion is relevant or maybe it's not. But I try to look at the Bible. So this guy, Yuval Noah Harari, okay, he's praised by Obama, Zuckerberg, Gates, MIT, Stanford, Harvard. He's currently the world's #1 best-selling author. He sold 45 million copies of his books in the last couple of years. Let me give you a little context. As famous as I am not, or as famous as I am, I typically will sell in a given month, let's say 100 copies of certain books. So like I told you before, I've written, nearly 20 books, whatever, 20, I think 24 books, 25 books. But, about, 4 or 5 times a day, 10 times a day, someone buys a book, they go to Thrive Time Show, and I sell primarily to business owners. But could you imagine if someone had sold 45 million copies of their books in the past 2 years? And I've had some endorsements over the years from some big time people. We've had, Robert Kiyosaki or David Robinson, the NBA Hall of Fame, or, or insert the name of, said person. We've had some big endorsements over the years. But imagine if you were endorsed by Bill Gates, Barack Obama, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, the whole of the mainstream media, late night television. That's Yuval Noah Harari. If you open your Bible to Revelation chapter 16, verse 12 through 14, the Bible states that when the Euphrates River dries up, and it is, that the false prophet in China, says the false prophet will show up and China and Russia will team up, and they are. So the Bible says, Revelation chapter 16, verse 12 through 14, this is not my opinion, that when the Euphrates River dries up, and it is, the false prophet will show up, and he is, and China and Russia will team up. So this is what Yuval Noah Harari says will take place in corporations. This is him actually talking about it. Here we go. You walk into a room
and there is a picture of Kim Jong Un on the wall, and the bracelet picks up the signs of anger because it has access to your brain. That's very bad news for you. Even George Orwell's 1984, they couldn't really get into your brain. There was still this sphere of private world, and this is about to disappear. In the West, the main concern now is what is known as surveillance capitalism. That, okay, it's not a kind of dictator that spies on your brain, but you have all these corporations and maybe all these government agencies which are monitoring what's happening inside your body. What does it mean? I mean, COVID it accelerates the process of digitalization and automatization. It legitimizes the deployment of mass surveillance, and it makes surveillance go under your skin. This is Richard Warner.
It makes surveillance go under your skin. So they're saying that, and that sounds a lot like Revelation chapter 13, verse 16 through 18. So back to this theme. I don't know if it's helpful for somebody. I just don't do BS. And you say, what does BS stand for? I kind of look at it as it's a blind-sided emotional perspective to life. It's where you just blindly are feeling your way around going off of emotions. I don't do the blindsided emotional argument thing. And if you look at what's happening right now, you look at our country and you look at the fact that we have illegal immigrants pouring in into our country. And you look at Egypt, which is not necessarily known as being the most prosperous country in the world, and they have built a massive wall to keep the people of Gaza out. And we're supposed to believe that America can't figure it out. When you see countries like Dubai using their oil revenues to erect a massive city, the world's leading infrastructure, and they've done it in 3 decades. And we're being told that America doesn't have the ability to do this when we have liquid gold under our feet, when we have children being taught that boys are being taught they're girls, girls are being taught boys, the LGBTQ thing. And we're told by teachers that, we didn't know that was in the book. Thanks for pointing that out. When you have Satan statues in the Iowa Capitol, when you see America now aborting and or sacrificing babies to Baal since 1971, that's 1971 again, through abortion. When you see these things happen, when you see the Grammys sponsored by Pfizer, and it's a satanic theme. When you see Usher performing on top of what appears to be a ode to the Illuminati stage, when you have Alicia Keys playing the piano on a serpent head shaped piano, when you have an upside down cross clearly present on the stage, when you have the concert, so that Super Bowl halftime show with Usher starts off with these peacocks running onto the field, which is a peacock also means phoenix, like rise from the ashes, like build back better. When you see these things, when you see Taylor Swift in the press box or in the luxury box with Isis Spice, her name is Isis Spice, and she's holding an upside down cross around her neck. She's flashing demon signs. When you see Taylor Swift doing videos about witchcraft, and you see soccer moms going, I don't know if Taylor Swift meant to be demonic or not. I don't know. I don't know if she meant to be demonic. And we're seeing men go, no, the Grammys, I don't know if it's 100% satanic. I think it's art. When you see people go, well, the problem with building the wall, is because I used to work in the military too. I hear this all the time. I used to work in the military too, and it takes a long time to get something done. So even if Trump wanted to build a wall, you'd have to look at the environmental impact, and we just probably what? I mean, when you see this woke jackassery pervasive, it really, going back to my analogy, it blows my mind, because to turn on this microphone, we have to plug in this cord. And if this analogy were to be carried out, our government just sits there and goes, you want to connect this cord to that mic? What cord again? This cord. Our good friend from Utah, our senator from Utah, will now address the committee. And he's going, yeah, we need to connect the cord. We got to connect the cord. The cord's what we need. We got to connect it. The next speaker gets up. Well, I sincerely disagree with my good friend from Utah, and the great people of Iowa aren't going to stand for this, and yada, yada. We don't need this cord. And they go back and forth, and they go, fine, we agree. We'll pass House Bill, blah, 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 1947-A4. And then in that thing they agree on, this omnibus, this pork barrel, whatever you call it, all of a sudden we get all of this woke ideology that's being funded
That's
to
right.
solve. It's unbelievable that they create 5 new problems to solve one.
Right.
It's complete jackassery.
That's right, and it's buried in there, and it's absolutely insane, and I think, I mean, I see even now corporations not only are doing their own with this whole ESG and their own tracking of their so-called carbon footprint and their own tracking of these things and even employee goals having inclusion and diversity and equity in employee goals and now requiring even their vendors, their suppliers to fill out like EcoVadis, a climate survey or to fill out their own climate footprint and these sorts of things. And so are you telling me that this might just be another step toward that surveillance capitalism, and maybe they're gonna be tracking other things as well?
I 100% agree with it. I mean, we're seeing the Bible is very clear that when the Euphrates River dries up, you will see the false prophets show up, and China and Russia will team up. So we're watching it happen. I don't want it to happen. I'm not prophetic, but I happen to read the Bible, and I think that a lot of Christians, not your listeners, but a lot of Christians, a lot of times we go to a church with a big church, very small Bible. We bring with us. We bring a very small Bible to a very big church, and we can't read the words on the page. So years ago, I bought a large font Bible so I could read the words. So this is a copy of a book called Rich Dad Guide to Investing I read years ago. This is what I do to books. This is Robert Kiyosaki's book. And the font is in a size where I can actually read the words. But a lot of times people have a very small Bible. I was sitting next to a lady at church this Sunday, great lady, I'm sure, but she couldn't read the words on the page. So we were going through a deep dive into the book of Acts. The pastor was teaching on the book of Acts, and he asks us to open up the Bible to the book of Acts. I'm not criticizing her, but she couldn't read the words. So that's a problem. So I encourage everybody, if you go to timetofreeamerica.com/Alex, like Alex Jones, timetofreeamerica.com/Alex, I put together 119 biblical prophecies that are coming to pass simultaneously tied to current events. And you can go there. I put this presentation together for the multi-hour interview I did with Alex Jones and General Flynn. And I just want to give people an example of some of these so you can see. It's timetofreeamerica.com/revelation or timetofreeamerica.com/Alex, timetofreeamerica.com/Alex, where you can learn all about the book of Revelation. But the word corona numerically is 666. And you say, what? You just start there. So the word C, corona, C is a 3, O is a 15, R is an 18, O is a 15, N is a 14, A is a 1. And you go, well, it's just coincidence. See, that's what happens. CERN, the logo for CERN is 666. They're trying to isolate the God gene. They're literally trying to isolate the God particle and recreate the Big Bang over there at CERN. They're trying. Let me read this to you. This is stuff you can find here on this page, timetofreeamerica.com/Alex. So this is CERN on the CERN website. I'm going to send you a link right now in the private chat so you can post it if you want or just look at it if you want to. This is from the CERN website. And these guys at CERN, who, by the way, they have a 666 logo. They're in Geneva. They have the god of Shiva in front of them, the false god of Shiva, the god of destruction statue in front of them. So if you go to paragraph 4 of this document, this is on the CERN website. They're documenting their findings. This is what CERN says. Here we're looking at an imminent visit from a race of carnivorous dinosaur men, the superhuman clone hive legions of some evil genetic queen empress, infinite polypantheons of dark nega deities imprisoned for eons and hungering to feast upon human souls, a parallel history, victorious Nazi global Reich or something of that type. This is what the scientists at CERN say they're finding. So for anybody out there that doesn't understand this story or didn't know this story, Nimrod tried to build the Tower of Babel, and God confounded his language. And so Nimrod changed his name to Gilgamesh and was buried underneath the Euphrates River. The Bible tells us when the Euphrates River dries up, that's when the false prophet will show up. I don't know if you know this, but Yuval Noah Harari, he was discovered by Barack Obama when he was working on the Gilgamesh Project. Yuval Noah Harari was working on the Gilgamesh Project, which is a project to offer humans eternal life and to merge humans with animals, like Nephilim Part 2. And it's called the Gilgamesh Project. And if anybody goes to rumble.com and you search for Gilgamesh Project, I've put videos of Yuval Noah Harari talking about this. So this guy's trying to do Tower of Babel 2.0. He's trying to bring back the Nephilim, the fallen angels mated with humans. He's trying to merge humans with animals. This is real. And so that is what's happening, is these are satanic, godless, Luciferian Marxists who are trying to bring about Nimrod 2.0, Tower of Babel 2.0. And so if you're out there today, I've just got 3 solutions for you. One, go to timetofreeamerica.com/Alex because all the facts are there. Second, if you come and join us at the Reawaken America Tour, our final booked event we have is June 7th and 8th in Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, Michigan, June 7th and 8th. It will feature General Flynn, Kash Patel, Laura Trump, Eric Trump, Jim Brewer. We've had Donald J. Trump Jr. I mean, it really is a great cast of characters. Very serious people from the military world, people like Michael Lindell from the economic world, people like Tom Renz from the legal world, people like Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Dr. Stella Emanuel from the medical space, people like Jim Brewer, Roseanne from Hollywood. And again, that's all right there at timetofreeamerica.com, June 7th and 8th. And then finally, I just encourage everybody out there today, ask God how he can use your time and treasure and talents to save this nation. And if you want to learn more about the Reawaken Tour, you just go to timetofreeamerica.com. We have a documentary you can watch tonight for free at timetofreeamerica.com, which tells you all about the Reawaken Tour. It features General Flynn, Michael Lindell, and other people of note. And again, that's timetofreeamerica.com.
Well said. And I love how you're bringing this back to the Bible. You've got the prophecies. I would encourage everybody to check that out. And, we talk a lot about Acts 17:11. We need to be like the Bereans. They received the word that was taught with all eagerness, but they searched the scriptures for themselves to see whether what was taught was so, to see if it was true and if it lined up. And so teachers are responsible to a higher standard, but everybody's responsible for their own understanding. And so we encourage people to have a Bible that you can read that has a big enough print, or get an audio Bible, or whatever it is that you need to do to make sure that you are in the Word of God, so that you have a good sniffer. You can smell test things. This smells right. That doesn't smell right. Yeah, it resonates with my spirit. Yeah, it doesn't resonate with my spirit. So we need to be in the Word of God. And so I love how you are pointing people back to that. You've referenced several passages in Revelation, and we'll probably have to go back to get those so we can go back and study them ourselves. And so as we wrap up here, what other closing thoughts do you want to share? I want to make sure we get everything out here that we need to get.
Well, I'd just say, again, your program is an incredible broadcast, and everybody out there, we need to be subscribing to broadcasts like yours and stop listening to bogus corporate-controlled media, specifically Big Pharma. I don't know if people know this, but Big Pharma controls the vast majority of Christian media, the vast majority of secular media. Yep. And so when you listen to media, your mind is what the mind is fed. So the mind becomes what the mind is fed. The mind is what the mind is fed. So if you spend your day hearing pro-big pharma, pro-godless, globalist, Marxist, New World Order kind of thinking, it will infect your brain, and you become contagious with your outrageous ideas. So I encourage everybody out there, get in the Bible. So find a way to read the Bible on a daily basis. That's a big thing for me. Read the Bible on a daily basis. And then the second thing is subscribe to your podcast. I think it's really important that people do that, because by subscribing to your podcast and carving out time to listen to your show and the truth that your show presents, that's less time you have to available to watch mindless, godless corporate media.
Well said. Well, Clay, it has been great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us and all those knowledge bombs and understanding that you're sharing with us.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to our listeners. Wow, what an incredible knowledge-packed session with Clay Clark. Absolutely amazing. I hope you will check out those links that he shared. We'll put them in the show notes for you. And make sure, if you want to get more past episodes of Cutting Edge Faith, you can go to ryanshoward.com. You can also get in touch with me there and let me know what's on your mind and how I can help. Thank you so much for joining. God bless, and we'll see you in the next episode.